Check it out. I drive these brothers crazy. I do it on the daily.
Wipe it down. Wipe.
Card brown sugar. Heel of bread.
That trick is also good for adding moisture to any dry herbs you might be smoking cooking with, if those herbs are harshing your throat as you cook them.
Take them titties out, cause I'm tryna see them. AM to the PM, double did them, and I need them.
So how many of you all knew this? At gas stations, this little lip right here is made to drain out your squeegee. I'm gonna show you an amazing way to get snakes out of any area and keep them away. If you guys could, leave me a comment on something you all need help with next. All you're gonna need is baby powder. It don't have to be Johnson's, it can be any brand. Just take the baby powder and sprinkle it around any area you don't want the snakes. This will not hurt the grass and it will keep them all away. Enjoy. I'm gonna show you how to keep fleas, gnats, and ticks out of your yard by just using one thing you've got laying around the kitchen. If you guys could, leave me a comment on something you all need help with next. Let's go ahead and get into the video. All you need is salt. Add 3 tablespoons of salt to a spray bottle with 8 ounces of water. Just take the salt water, shake, and mist around your yard. This will not hurt the grass, and it will get rid of any fleas, ticks, or gnats you've got around. Enjoy, guys.
I'd say bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I would say.
And you think you're going to get in on
No,
that?
but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms. They're wrong. Now, if I died and it was Pluto, Hades, and if it was the 12 Greek gods, then I would have more truck with it, because the Greeks they didn't pretend not to be human in their appetites and in their capriciousness and in their unreasonableness. They didn't present themselves as being all-seeing, all-wise, all-kind, all-beneficent. Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac, totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him? What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. So, atheism is not just about not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living.
Mark my words, guys, if Zillow doesn't take this down, it's gonna have easily 50,000 views this week. Because at first, this looks like a totally normal Midwestern family home, all American football loving types. But then right after the pictures of the kitchen is this. This is what's in the first bedroom. Now, normally you guys in my comments are pretty quick to say, maybe there's some trafficking going on here. And normally I'm like, oh, pump the brakes. But this is not giving off good vibes. Why is the only piece of furniture in each room a little vanity? In the primary suite, I think it's pretty clear only a man lives here. There's consumer research out there somewhere that says these Steelers sheets have only ever been purchased by single men. I'm gonna give you a trigger warning here. This is why I said if Zillow lets it stay up. I mean, maybe it's for watching football. Then we've got a club with its own custom branding. Can't say that I'm that surprised, but if this is for your friends to just come over and hang out, don't you feel weird asking your friends to use these bathrooms?
I don't know know if he got it out of here or if he got it off y'all's shelf or brought it in, and watch this.
Let me see your hands, you gorilla-loving, banana Kool-Aid chicken lover.
I didn't want to put it back on the shelf. I didn't.
Give it to me. I am going to give this to my coach.
Can I buy it?
No, we can't sell that with this on it.
Press it?
Let me see your hands, you gorilla-loving, banana Kool-Aid chicken lover.
They might. It said what?
Quit being a bitch.
Quit being a bitch.
Let me see your hands, you gorilla-loving,
Stop
banana Kool-Aid chicken
talking.
lover.
Turn it off.
Thought I did.
Let me see your hands,
No.
Oh my God, I have been taking a deep dive into 990s for the past year. A 990 is basically just the public-facing financial documents that foundations have to file every year and nonprofits have to file every year. It's their tax forms. But they're open to the public. You can get online, go to ProPublica, you can look them up. So I'm going to give you an example. There's one particular foundation I've been looking at that's worth multi-billions of dollars. All foundations are required to give away 5% of their fair market value assets every year. However, most people don't know that that 5% does not have to be directly to charities. Other things count towards the 5%. They're called distributions, and qualifying distributions include everything from the salaries they pay their staffs to the copy paper they buy for their office. It includes legal fees, attorney's fees, occupancy. So in the case of this multi-billion-dollar foundation, when all of the math is done, they're actually only giving away less than 3% of their assets directly to charities each year. Less than 3%. Billions of freaking dollars. They have billions. Billions. And fun fact, because that corpus, that billions of dollars, is invested in the stock market every year, which has an annual return on average of about 10%, they're making twice what they give out, more than twice what they give out every year. The corpus is growing. They're making money off their money. Y'all, I had to talk to like 5 people to make sure that I was understanding this correctly because I thought there's no way. I don't understand these numbers. I'm not dumb, but I'm not that smart. Surely I'm reading this incorrectly. But no. I am right, and I'm sharing this with you. What's even worse? This nonprofit pays its board of trustees salaries. Now, let me tell you, only about 25% of foundations actually pay their board. Generally, boards are volunteers. There are legitimate reasons why you might want to pay your board, and I will get into those at some other time. But needless to say, this particular foundation that I'm talking about pays their trustees. Every trustee but one makes, I don't know if I can tell you because honestly, I think it's going to identify this foundation too much. Let's just say that every trustee on this board makes more than the median American income for 8 hours of work a week. There's one exception to this, and that is a trustee who makes $100,000 a year for 12 hours of work a week. I can confirm that at least 90% of these trustees are wealthy on their own without these salaries. And shocker or not, those salaries that are being paid to the trustees also count towards the 5% distribution. It's insane!
Have you ever heard of a human decanter? A human decanter is essentially where someone takes a catheter and puts it into their urethra and they drain their bladder of all the urine. Once the bladder is emptied, they then use the catheter to backfill their bladder with typically wine. Who knows? Maybe they get a little crazy, and then they excrete said alcohol into other partygoers' mouths. And in no way am I trying to kink shame, but when I tell you that the UTI that will come from that is gnarly, it's gnarly. I think it's fair to say that the urethra should really only be an exit only. Please.
Let's just give this a attempt.
Hey, buddy. I was gonna see if you're ready to play with me yet or if you still need some time.
That's what I thought. I'm gonna go ahead and screw off.
Bro, I did this? Yeah! I did this? Yeah, because in second nature, it's I truly hate seeing women in these type of situations, especially when there's clear-cut evidence of physicality. But having simplistic understanding of basic compounds within the human body truly helps. For instance, potassium. Our body is able to process and break down and metabolize potassium. There's also something called potassium chloride, which is nothing more than a salt substitute. So if a person was to ingest too much potassium on top of potassium chloride, well, then they would go into a cardiac arrest. And when they perform an autopsy, do a toxicology report, the potassium's already been metabolized, blood level will come back normal. And on the death certificate, it would just be natural causes. See, having simplistic knowledge of compounds within the human body and the ability to bake a wonderful banana loaf bread truly helps people out in these wonderful domestic violence situations. Wouldn't you agree?
Hey, good morning. Everything's racist. Even these.
Did you know that no trespassing signs like these are directly linked to slavery in the US? This professor spent over a decade uncovering the awful truth behind these signs. Apparently, it goes back to the 1600s and the arrival of British colonizers in America.
England has very strict trespass laws. The moment you cross into someone else's land, it's a serious crime. If you poach on someone else's land, one of the penalties was transportation to the American colonies. But once the settlers got to North America, all of English law gets thrown out, and they develop a distinctly new set of laws.
And one of the key elements is this: trespassing is not a crime.
Under slavery, on most plantations, a large share of the food that enslaved people had eaten was stuff they produced themselves, because those white landowners would provide them with cornmeal and with fatback, which is like bacon but less meat and more fat. No one could live just on that. And so everything else, all the vegetables, all the eggs, all the meat except for fatback, all of that was either fished, hunted, grown, or foraged.
But all of that changed after the Civil War in 1865, when slavery was abolished.
By the end of the Civil War, all formerly enslaved people are now free. And then there's new elections, but at that point, only white people can vote. And so these all-white electorates vote for all-white legislatures. And some of the first laws they make are laws criminalizing trespass. And it happens across the South, making it more difficult to feed yourself by limiting hunting, by limiting fishing, by prohibiting foraging. After slavery, you could pretty much feed yourself without working for your former slave owner. And so there's this asymmetry in which these white landowners desperately need black workers. But black people don't need these white landowners because they can feed themselves. Part of the reason I know they were doing this against black people is they said, we are doing this specifically to make them work for us. It will confine them more.
Essentially, these white landowners were trying to continue as many of the conditions of slavery as possible after it actually ended. But their attempts went even further than no trespassing laws.
Mississippi and South Carolina tried to institute laws, for example, called the Black Codes, where if a black person worked for a white person, they were required to call them master, and they would need written permission to leave their workplace. Not having a job was a crime, whether you needed a job or not.
And then there were the fines that came with these crimes. Fines so high that few people could actually afford them. So to pay them off, black Americans were basically pushed into forced labor.
They could sell you to a white employer for the number of months it would take for you to repay the fine. So you would have an auction on the courthouse steps that was indistinguishable from an auction of a slave that had happened 5 or 10 years before. If you see a no trespassing sign, if you're wondering why it's a crime to go on someone's land, a big part of why is an effort by white landowners to disadvantage black workers right after the Civil War.
Come take a shit with me at Hermes. There's nothing like a store made for billionaires to make you feel out of place. So I went straight to my safe place. Jump scare coming up. Mrs. Meyer soap straight from Target. Try your best to look past the hand soap because the energy in here is definitely Hermes. I accidentally forgot my Kelly at home. Slight redemption here for having a Toto. But this toilet paper brings us right back down. My jaw dropped when I felt how thin this was. Sanity was incredibly clean. Nothing in the automatic soap dispenser, so I did have to use Mrs. Meyer's. Toto sink as well, and standard paper towels. I give it a 4 out of 5. It was incredibly clean. Where should we shit next?
Ooh, I can't wait to dig into this one. It's gonna get juicy. So originally I had said that traditions are just a set of rules that were written by dead people. To which this commenter said, no, traditions are solutions to problems that we have forgotten existed. So let's dive into the history behind some common wedding traditions, and you can tell me in a minute if you believe they're still solutions to a problem. My name is Meredith. I'm a Wisconsin-based wedding planner, and I share all my wedding planning tips and tricks for all the engaged couples on TikTok. Now, you may or may not remember that marriages used to be a business transaction. They were an exchange of ownership. A bride, a daughter, would be considered the property of her father and would be sold for hopefully a large chunk of change to a new owner, her husband. These were often arranged marriages with an unwilling bride with the intention of either forming family alliances or moving their daughter up into a higher social class. And knowing that history, that is the foundation where almost all of our wedding traditions begin. The tradition of a bride and groom not seeing each other before the ceremony begins, that's so that the groom didn't run away because he thought his bride was too ugly. It's also why brides wear veils to cover their face. This is also where the tradition of bridesmaids begin too. When a family would travel long distances to bring their daughter to be married, they would bring along a caravan of other women. When a family would journey a long distance to bring their bride to be married, they would disguise her among a caravan of other women, so her suitor wouldn't know which one she was, or to prevent kidnapping and have her dowry stolen. Bridesmaids were basically a decoy. And the history behind the tradition of a best man wasn't always the groom's best friend. It was called a best man because it was often the best swordsman. And he would be responsible for either helping kidnap the bride, ensuring she didn't run away, and he would basically act as bodyguard for the ceremony to make sure the transaction went appropriately. Now, a lot of people think that the current modern tradition of the removal of the garter is already gross enough, but did you know that it used to be a whole hell of a lot worse? Back in the day, the couple needed to prove the legitimacy of their union through consummating publicly. And the family or the wedding party would serve as witnesses. And guests would show their support by waving around the garter. Then over time, couples got a little bit more modest and it transitioned to the husband would remove the garter and then throw the garter out the bedroom door for the guests who were outside the door to find, which then transitioned one more time to where the modern tradition lies today. Next one, do you know the history of why a honeymoon is called a honeymoon? Because newlyweds were sent off to be holed away and they were supplied with a month's worth of mead, which is a honey wine, which is considered an aphrodisiac, and they weren't allowed to return home until they were pregnant. The other history behind a honeymoon is frankly even worse. In the situation of an unwilling bride, the husband would run away and they would go on a months-long vacation until either the family stopped looking for her or until she was impregnated, which at that point it would be considered too late to rescue her anyway. So again, I'll ask you, do our modern problems still require these traditional solutions? Traditions don't mean shit anymore. And that's coming from a professional wedding planner. So if you want to take your partner's last name or don't, or if you want to have a wedding party or don't, if you want to do a first look or not, I don't care. You don't need to feel locked in to doing things the traditional way because that's how they have to be done. Come on now.
Hey, good morning. Today is Monday, May 8th, the 128th day of the year. And so far, we've had 248 mass shootings. That works out to about 2 a day. 372 people have been killed, and 917 people have been wounded. Meanwhile, the police have admitted to killing at least 359 people. And we don't even know if that number is accurate or not, because the police only turn in officer-involved shootings on a voluntary basis. And that number does not include people who've died under mysterious circumstances while in police custody. There are 237 days left in the year. Here we go again. Pray, mourn, and repeat.